All right, it's recording. Quiet down. Thank you. You're right. Sit properly, please. All right, today's lesson. So remember, your homework was 1E, 1F. I'll be coming around to check you guys if you haven't uploaded, but that was one of the first things I wanted to check that you've uploaded. We'll talk about it later. Today's 1G, which is now multiplying and dividing negative numbers. And it is easy in terms of fluency what you need to do. But the Y component is what I want to spend time explaining to you, because a lot of students learn this by memorizing this step. And this is what they memorize. And I promise you, if you have any siblings that are older than you, they'll probably know this bit. They'll know that double positive will give you
Negative.
positive. If it's the same signs. If it's the same signs, it's a good thing. So it's positive. But if they're different signs, so like plus minus, that gives you negative. And then negative, positive, negative. So they'll memorize this sign chart. And then when I give them an example, here's an example. If I gave you negative 2 times positive 5, okay, this is an example. The students, your siblings, if you have any or anyone older than you, they'll say, well, according to the chart, this is a negative number. This is a positive number. So negative positive should give you negative. So they'll say it's negative, and they just do 2 times 5, which is 10. This is called fluency, right? So it's easy to teach that bit, but a lot of the times they don't understand it. This is why one of the first misconceptions is soon as students learn 1G, I find that they start making mistakes with addition. So things that you did for your homework, 1E, 1F, requires a similar chart, but they mix it up. If I gave the students in a test and I gave them negative 2 plus 5, they mix that idea and they will say negative number, positive number, therefore the answer is negative, and they do either 5 plus 2, which is 7, or they do 5 take away 2, which is 3, both of which is wrong. Okay, and the reason why this happens is because students are memorizing this chart. So I like to explain the logic as to why it happens and how you actually relate it to the real life scenario. That way, you have a better understanding of what this is and you don't confuse what this actually is. So that's what the first page is going to be. I'm going to break it down so you can understand the logic. If you don't understand my logic and my explanation, at the worst case scenario, you can memorize. And memorizing comes with practice. The more you practice, the better you get. But if you don't do either, if you don't understand the thing I'm saying, and you're not practicing, well, then naturally you won't learn negative numbers. That's how it works. Yeah? So let's start off with the explanation. So you can think of it as the number that you're looking at is the number of jumps, and then whatever you're multiplying to is the size and direction of each jump. Now that's one way of thinking about it. I don't like it that way. Some teachers will explain it this way. I'm going to explain it in a sort of more mathematical or like real life sense. Yeah? So here we go. Let's remind ourselves. The negative symbol means, what did I say last session? What does negative symbol represent again? What's another way of thinking about it? Fraser? Yes, so it goes left on the number line, so it's a direction. And one of the ways is to remember, if you put a negative sign on a number, it tells you to reverse that operation. Or think of it as the opposite. So fill that in. When you see a negative sign, which is different to minusing is different. Actively listening or actively writing notes. Okay, but not. Both is good too. Okay, so actively listening and actively writing notes. So you got reverse or opposite. The negative sign is different to minusing. Minusing is the opposite of plus, which means gaining. So when you say minus something, you're actually losing. Okay, you just don't know what you're losing yet, but you're losing something. Let's have a look at multiplications of what you learned in primary school. And as I'm leading you to the concept of negative 3 times 4 and then negative 3 times negative 4, hopefully you understand the logic here. Let's go with this one. So we first said positive times a positive is going to give you a positive, right? So that's one way of memorizing, but I don't like memorizing. I like you to think. Let's have a think. When you say 3 times 4, we know the answer is 12. Great. But what does 3 times 4 truly mean? What is 3 times 4?
That means 3 groups of 4.
3 groups of 4, yes. So when you say 3 groups of 4, logically and realistically, what does that mean? This is what it means. 1, 2, 3, 4, you're a team. That's one group. Then I go to the next group. I go, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, you're the second group. So in the first group, we have these 4 here. In the second group over here, I have another 4, but I said I want 3 groups, so I'm going to choose another 4. I go 1, 2, 3, 4, and that is a total of 3 groups of 4 that I've chosen, but you can see 4 plus 4 plus 4 is how we know 3 times 4 is 12, right? So really, thank you. Multiplication was repeated addition. Then when I asked you this question, so looking at this logic, if 3 groups of 4 is 4 plus 4 plus 4, then what does 3 groups of negative 4 look like? What does that mean? Yes, Quinn, say it again. Beautiful. See, this is one group of negative 4. This is another group of negative 4. That's the second group. And this is the third group of negative 4. Now, if you look at a number line, so if I zoom out, see, you start at 0. This is where you're at. You can have groups of 4 in the positive direction, or remember the negative means opposite direction, or reverse it. So I don't have to have 4 in the growing direction. I can have 4 in the diminishing direction. So I'm now going down 1. Oh, sorry, that's groups of 2. So that's 1, 2. Okay, but I need one group has to have 4 of them. So I've got 3, 4. Oh, sorry, wait. Whoops, it's over here. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's one group of 4. Then we can see another group of 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's my second group. And how many groups I want? I want 3. So here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. And I end up at negative 12. So we can say 3 groups of negative 4 is like saying you have a debt of 4 and you did it 3 times. What does that mean when you say 3 groups of negative 4? It's like you saying on a Monday, you went to the canteen, you didn't have money, you borrowed $4 from me. So you owe me $4 on a Monday. Then you also did the same thing on Tuesday. You owe me another $4, so that's twice now. Then on a Wednesday, you forget your money again, that's 3 times. So I would say, you owe me $4 3 times. See the language? I'm saying, it's like, how much do you owe me? I'm like, well, you borrowed $4 each time, and you owed me 3 times, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. So you can quickly do a multiplication. You know, 3 groups of negative 4, which means how much you owe me. You now owe me a total of $12. And the negative tells you that you owe money. That's the logic for it, right? So far, can I get a show of hands if you understood the first one and the second one? Hands up if you understood that. All right, good. Okay, so think about the positive is you gaining. It's like you working on a Monday at, say, Macca's, you get $4. You work on a Tuesday, you get $4, and you work on a Wednesday. So in 3 days, that's 3 times the $4, so you make $12 in profit. Yeah? Now, let's try to understand this bit. So this makes sense that when you had positive times a negative, this ended up being a negative answer. Okay? So 3 groups of what you owe ends up being negative. Now, this one. Negative 3 times 4. Negative 3 times 4. You see, the answer, I know it's negative 12 because we said from the chart, negative times a positive is negative. But a lot of students, especially your siblings and anyone older, I promise you, if you ask them, can you explain why negative 3 times negative 4 is going to be a positive and why negative 3 times 4, positive 4 is going to be a negative? Most students would not be able to explain to you because most students memorize mathematics. They don't learn mathematics. They don't understand mathematics. They just memorize. That's why a lot of students at my senior level start asking, when will I ever use maths? I have year 12 students at the moment that I'm teaching for foundation maths. It's like, I never use maths. When will I need it? Well, the reality is that you learnt it wrong or you never really understood it. That's why you don't know how to use it. But most students know how to add. Most students know how to subtract. And they see the relevance to that. But as soon as it comes to times tables, most students see it as magic. So I'm trying to demystify for you now. Yeah? So why is this negative 12? Well, there's 2 ways to look at it. You can look at it on a mathematical sense. On a number line, see on a number line, if this is 0, you understood 3 times 4. You said that's 3 groups of 4 in this direction. So you say, all right, that's 4, 8, 12. So you got 1 group, 2 groups, 3 groups. So it made sense that it was positive. But if I had 2 groups of 4, you say, oh yeah, that makes sense. 1 group, 2 groups, you say it's 8. So I've dropped down by 4. Then you say, well, 1 group of 4, that makes sense, and I only got 1 group of 4, so it's 4. But each time I'm dropping by 4 units. Can you see that? I'm dropping by 4, I'm dropping by 4. And then when you say, well, if you have 0 groups of 4, this essentially means you're not working to earn the $4. This is, you work 3 days. Boys, thanks. This is you working 3 days to earn $4. So you made $12 because you worked on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Yeah, so I'm going to write it in. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Let's say those are your shift days. If you worked all 3 days, you would make $12. If you only worked 2 of the days, 2 times 4, you made $8. If you only worked 1 of the days, you make $4. If you don't work any of those days, you make $0. That makes sense for most people, right? But then when we go to the next bit, -1 times 4, what does that mean? You see, the logic, if we're looking at the pattern, technically the next answer is I should subtract 4. And on the number line, if I subtract 4, I should end up at -4. The answer logically should be -4, -8, then -12 based on the pattern that I'm seeing, right? So each time you're dropping by -4. But what's the logic here? See, this is equivalent to you saying, normally if you worked Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, you should get $12 in that week, right? But there are some weeks that you're sick. If you happen to be sick in that week, yes, you earned $0, but what was your potential money that you could have got? See, in that week, yeah, you could have got $12 that you don't have. So this is like saying, you did work on a Tuesday, you did work on a Wednesday, but there was one day that you were sick. So there is -$4 that you need to account for. That's one group of a day that you're losing money. A money that you could have earned money. A day that was potentially your money, but you didn't get it. Whereas Thursday, Friday, it made sense you were never going to make money on those days. See, that's 0. That makes sense. Thursday, Friday, you're never getting a shift, so it's always going to be $0. But if you lost out on a Monday, you'd be like, damn, I could have made this much money, which you lost $4 that you could have had extra. Get me? And that's what some people feel on a Sunday. Do you know why people want to work on a Sunday? Hands up if you know. Why? How much extra?
1.5.
1.5 is for Saturdays? 2. Double pay on a Sunday. So if you get paid $4 an hour on a Sunday, you get double that pay, so you get $8 per hour, which is much better, right? So people like working on a Sunday, but that's only if you're on a shift. If you're not on that shift, you're always going to get 0. So what does the -1 represent? This could represent, this is one group of not earning money, or one group in this negative direction makes sense. That's $4 earning potential. 2 groups of 4 in this direction. So if I did 2 groups of 4, 1 group of 4, 2 groups of 4, so -2 times 4, so that direction, that's what the negative tells you. It tells you which direction you're going. That gives you an overall of potential loss. It's money that you couldn't earn. That's why negative times positive on 2 different ways of looking at it, either on an earning perspective or on a mathematical sequence, you can see a pattern. They all drop. So hence, negative times positive is minus. Or another way of thinking about it is this is representing removing any gains. Okay, so those who don't understand what I just said, I'm going to write it again. The -3 times the 4, you can actually understand this as reversing. So remember the negative is like reversing. And this is a gain. True? So this one means you are gaining a gain. This one is you gaining a debt. This is you reversing a gain. So, for example, in your bank accounts, which some of you, can I get a show of hands? Who has a bank account? Oh, most of you do. All right. So, this could happen sometimes if you don't check your transactions. Sometimes in your transactions, they give you a date. They say Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. And sometimes, very rare, but it has happened to some people, where you might have started off with 30 bucks, right? Then suddenly you log in, listening, you log in. So let's say you checked the last time you had $30 in your bank account. But then the next time you logged in, suddenly you now have $42, right? Now that could be an interest or it could be a mistake. Now let's say you're like, wait, where did I gain this $12 from, right? Let's say that it was meant to be each transaction that was made. Let's say it was like you subscribing to Netflix, and every month they're supposed to subtract $4 from your money. You are meant to lose $12 and end up at 18, right? So after 3 months, it should have been subtract $4 for 1 month of subscription to Netflix, subtract another month of subscription, subtract the third month of subscription. You should have $18 in total, right? But sometimes the banks do a mistake. Now, if they do a mistake, instead of subtracting, they gave you money, you got $42. What they do is they reverse that. So how do you reverse those gains? You gain $4, $4, $4. So to reverse it, they're doing minus the 4, minus the 4, minus the 4. But how many times did they reverse the transaction? They reversed 3 transactions. That's what it means. When you say 3 groups of -4 or -3 groups of 4, you're saying I'm removing or reversing a gain. So you had $4, and when they reversed that transaction on your bank account, how many times did they reverse it? That's what it's saying. That's what you're doing. You're reversing this gain 3 times. Does that make a bit more sense? Yeah? All right. Now the last one is the tricky one. But again, if you follow that mathematical pattern, you should be able to see. Here we go. Last example. -3 times -4. So if you follow the memorizing part, most students will know negative times negative gives you a positive. Thanks, Rory. I'm still speaking. Same with everyone else. Quinn, Rylan, Joachim. Sorry, Rylan. I'm still speaking. So here, in the last example, we know that negative times negative, based on memorizing, it's meant to be a positive number. But if you try to understand it logically, again, you can look at it in terms of the pattern. 3 times -4, we already established there was -12 because you got 3 groups of debt. Yeah, so you owed 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, so you owe $12 in total. You owe 2 days worth of $4. What's happening with that bag? Thank you. No, boys. That's the kind of behavior I don't want. So whilst I'm explaining, if you're not interested in this, do your own thing, sit there and do your own work, but I don't need you to muck around like that. See, that's not a positive learning environment. That you didn't have to be here to do that. That's a choice that you guys made. So whilst you're blaming each other, that to me is immature. See, my classes, I'm here to support you. That is not supporting each other. Don't do that. If you don't want to be here, go to the middle school, spend your time down there. I don't need you in my class. My class is for positive learning, and if you don't want to be here, don't be here. Make that choice with your parents, talk to the coordinators, and I can sit down and talk to your parents about that too. But if you're going to be in my class, don't act like that. Does that make sense? Let's go into both of you. All right, so here we go. So we got -12. This is 2 groups of days that you owe, okay? And then there's 1 day of what you owe, so it makes sense. That's -4, then 0. But you can see the pattern here. You're gaining $4 every time we're removing a debt. So that's only 1 day of debt. That's 0 days of debt. That's 3 days of debt. So of course you have 0 debt by this point. But then when you look at this one now, according to the pattern, each time you're adding 4, naturally this should be +4, 8, then 12. That's the pattern. So it seems like -1 times -4, a double negative is positive based on a pattern. But let's try to think of it in a logical sense. How does that occur in real life? This, remember, that means reverse a transaction, right? So you're reversing a transaction. Instead of a gain, this represents loss. You're reversing a loss. Does that make sense? This one is like saying, if you were looking at your bank transaction, you had $30 in your bank account. And each transaction was meant to gain, let's say, interest. Someone said interest before. You were meant to gain $4. So you should get $34 after the first month. After the second month, you're meant to get then another $4 is $38, and then $42, right? But then you go back into your bank account, you're expecting $42, but instead you now have 18. Then you call, you'll be like, what? What's going on? So what you do is you call the bank and you say, hey, something's wrong. Either someone's hacked my bank account and has been using my money, but I shouldn't be losing money. I should be gaining. So the amount of money that you've lost in those times, the banks will then go, I'll remove that. I'll remove that debt that you had. So instead of losing 3 groups, so that's meant from 30 minus 4, you're meant to have, they wrote 26, then you minus another 4, it's 22, and then you go down to 18, they're going to reverse it. And so if you reverse it once, that's what that means. Reverse one group of debt of -4. So $4 is what you owe. This -2 means reverse 2 groups of debt. So if you owed $4 that they mistakenly took out of your account, they took out $4, reverse that. If you reverse the $4 that they took away from your account, then you gain $4. That's why, with 8, because you gain $4 here, and you gain another $4 because it's 2 groups of it. Of course you have $8 in your pocket now. Same thing with this one. This means -1 times -4 means you're reversing one group of your debt. So if it was debt initially and you reverse that, it becomes gain. That's why this is one group of $4 that you now gain. Obviously, in this scenario of interest, instead of gaining money, they took money from you. So if you told the bank, they should reverse 3 groups of the $4 they took away from you. So you should gain $12. So instead of having $18, it should have been 30, back to 30 again. And then that should have made it to 42 if that was a gain. Because you started off with 30 and they're reversing it all back. Does that make sense? Okay, so that's what that negative means. You think of it as a direction. It tells you which direction to go. And then this one tells you, is it a gain or debt? If it's gain, it's positive. If it's negative, you're losing money. So you think of it as like you're either gaining debt or you're gaining extra money. That's what gaining means. Yeah, so that's on a logical sense as to why negative times a negative becomes positive, because this negative actually means reversing or opposite. Okay, so that's on a theoretical sense that I try to get you to understand how it gets used in real life in the bank accounts and budgeting and all that. Those are the kind of things that you go through. If you didn't understand what I was trying to say, especially these two, at the end of the day, you can just memorize this like everyone else has. I promise you, you can ask. I asked my year 12s and only one student was able to describe to me what was happening. So the student told me, doesn't that just mean it's gaining a profit? This is removing a loss. And he said gaining a debt and then losing a profit is how he described it. Only one student out of my year 12 methods class, which usually is the top 30% in the class, could answer that. The rest of the students know how to do it, but they don't know why. This is the difference between knowing, so fluency, just knowing how. If you have a tutor and all that, or you've gone ahead of the class, you usually know the how. But most of you don't know the why. And that's the difference between a very strong student at year 12 who really understands a mathematical problem or just goes through the motion. If you only go through the motion, at some point you get capped because it's just too, at some point you have to think. You can't just rely on procedures to get there. AI can do procedures. They're not really good at problem solving yet. Soon they will be. But you guys, what's different about you is you can think. You can be creative. That's what I'm teaching you to be. Yeah, and that's what maths is about. It's about teaching you to be critical, analytical, and creative, not machines. So at the end of the day, if you didn't understand it, you can memorize it. But these are your two most common problems. Multiplication versus addition. See, once you learn this exercise, you'll get familiar with it. You say negative times a positive. Negative positive gives you negative. And then here, negative negative makes positive. So if you times them, 3 times 4 is 12. So you say negative 3 times 4 is negative 12. Negative 3 times negative 4, you'd say positive 12. That's fluency skills. Then when you go into a test, this is where I see students make mistakes. Students will follow the same thing again. They'll say -3 plus a +4. They'll do the same thing again. Negative, positive. They'll write a negative. And they can either do here 4 plus 3, which is 7. Or they do 4 take away 3, which is -1 because they said negative and positive. Both of which is wrong. The answer is not -7, not -1. The answer is 1. Very good, because this means debt of $3 and you gained $4. So if you worked for $4, you worked on a Monday, and you owe me $3, if you paid me back my $3, you only got $1 left. That's a gain. So it should be +1, not -1. Not -7 either. See that? So there's a logic to what these numbers represent, but that's the common mistake. This is wrong. The correct answer should be +1. Same thing with this one. Most students will go negative, negative, so they write positive, and they do 3 plus 7, plus 4 is 7, or they might do 4 take away 3, and write +1. But that doesn't make sense, because if you think about it logically, you owe $3, and you gain another debt. You owe $3 and you gain another $4 of debt, so how much debt do you have? 7. So should it be -7? Not this. But that's because students don't understand what these numbers represent. They're memorizing. So if you practiced enough, you know the difference. But if you haven't practiced enough, that's the most common mistake, and that's how I catch out on students who get it and students who don't. Does that make sense? All right, team, that is for today's lesson. I want you to turn over the page. I'm going to give you, let's say, 60 seconds to answer these 4 questions, just to practice fluency.